Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealey. It's Friday, September the 6th. It is an absolutely beautiful Friday morning in the ATL. Let's see where my trusty co-host is this morning. Let's see where Mr. David Slavin is. Let's see. There he is. Good morning,
Hey,
David.
good morning, Tamara.
How are you, David?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Um, really, it is a really nice day out there today. I'm gonna swim my laps later in the afternoon, and it'll be a real pleasant day because I swim outside in the um at the outdoor Emery pool.
Oh, good for you. It's almost pool season is almost over, David. So I mean, you better get those laps in while you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, good morning, good morning. We are, never a dull moment in Georgia, never a dull moment in politics. What's going on your end, David? What's going on?
Well, I was thinking about two groups that I think deserve some considerable attention and a critique. One of them is this organization called Indivisible, which has
Mm,
very, very widespread um, uh, reach and large numbers of activists who were really a very, very important um, uh, voice and force in uh, here in Georgia with the campaign in the sixth congressional district, which
mm,
Ossoff, uh, John Ossoff narrowly lost, and which Lucy McBath narrowly won in 2018. And
mm-hmm.
has been very, very important in the blue wave of 2018. And the other group is the Democratic Socialists of America, which also has become very prominent. Both of these groups have increased their membership enormously over the last 2 or 3 years. Um, DSA um, mainly on the Bernie Sanders wave. Um,
Democratic Socialists of America, for those that aren't familiar with the acronyms, David. Everybody ain't all into politics like we are.
I said Democratic Socialists of America. Yeah, so DSA is also very active here in Atlanta, the Metro Atlanta DSA, MADSA. And we had one of their elders on a few weeks ago, Milt Tambor, to discuss his autobiography that he published himself about his years in Detroit as a social worker, union leader, and here in Atlanta for the last 20 years as a kind of retiree and founder of the DSA here in Atlanta. So these two organizations are really important for people on the left to be aware of and to
You're talking
think
about Indivisible and DSA. Is that where we're going with this?
Indivisible and the Democratic Socialists of America.
Mm-hmm.
And here in
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta, both of these groups have been really active. Um, and as I say, the Indivisible has really taken a very leading role in the sixth congressional district, which should be familiar to you, Tamara.
I'm very familiar with the sixth congressional district. As a matter of fact, it overlapped. It overlapped with my 40th Senate district when I ran.
Exactly. And that's where we see a lot of the mobilization for Indivisible in the Atlanta area. Um, these two groups have a one thing that's common to both of them, and that I think is really a critical issue to raise. They are both overwhelmingly white, and DSA here in Atlanta and probably throughout the country is 90 to 95% white.
Mm-hmm.
And although DSA has some prominent people of color who are affiliated with it, most famously Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and who they have helped, and Pramila Jayapal and a few other people who are part of one of them being I forget what they call themselves, the squad.
Yeah, they call themselves the squad. AOC,
Yeah,
Ileana,
Presley.
Is it Presley,
Yeah,
Rashida Tlaib,
yeah.
and who's the fourth one? It's four.
I think
Look,
it's
I'm missing one.
yeah, it's yeah, where
Somebody will tell us, chime in and tell us who the fourth person is we're missing. Keep going, David.
yeah, she's the Palestinian woman who was denied entry by Israel to visit her
Mhm.
grandmother and and she refused to be confined by the Israelis. But in any case, Tlaib, right? Um,
Mhm. Alexandria Cortez, Ileana Omar, Ayanna Presley, and Rashida Tlaib. That's the four. I'm sorry if I didn't get it right immediately, but I got it right now.
yeah. And Pramila Jayapal is from Washington State, I think, from Seattle, or maybe she's from Oregon. I think it's Seattle, and is another person who's been an active socialist, an open socialist. So these folks
They're
are
those are the people of color in the group, those that are more prominent. But what
well,
you're saying is that there's in the group itself that there's a large majority. It's white.
well,
It's not
there's
people of color.
that is the issue. So you have some prominent faces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in Indivisible, there really aren't any of those prominent faces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, Obviously, um, you know, uh, Lucy McBath is African American, but she's not in Indivisible. She's
Lucy's not in anything. I'm very
yeah,
disappointed with Lucy. So I don't make me go there this morning because I'm still
yeah,
not very happy that Lucy McBath has not signed on to HR 40, which is the study committee
yeah.
to study reparations. So Lucy McBath is pretty moderate, and I'm very disappointed that she has not signed on to HR 40.
Well, Indivisible's dynamics are really interesting in and of themselves. Um, uh, this Harvard sociologist Theda Skocpol, uh, who studied the Tea Party back in 2010 to 2012, has done a study of Indivisible now, contrasting and comparing the two movements on the right and on the left.
Mm-hmm.
Scottsville estimates that 70 to 90% of Indivisible's activists around the country are white women with an average age of about 55. So,
Mm.
and DSA is very interesting because it was made up of a bunch of old farts, like me. And in the last 3 years, uh, there's been a massive increase. The number of DSA members 3 years ago was about 7,000. The numbers today are over 55,000. So, and almost all of the people who have joined DSA have been in their 20s and 30s. So the average age,
But still overwhelmingly white.
overwhelmingly white, and not only that, overwhelmingly male as well,
Mm-hmm.
75% male. So you have these two organizations that are really interesting in terms of their demographics and their demographic dynamics. One
Mm-hmm.
of which is overwhelmingly young. I mean, the average age of DSA member is probably in their early 30s. And given that the 7,000 that were there, 3 or 4 years ago, were overwhelmingly above 60, maybe mostly over 70. That's a massive demographic change that's taken place, and also at the same time mostly male.
So they have this. They have this new populate. They have this new group of people that have joined these organizations, but not people of color, not Black people, not brown people.
Yeah,
predominantly white and predominantly male.
right. And so the question is, what does that do to these groups? What's the dynamic? What's the center of gravity? How do they think? How do they process what they're doing? And
how do they create an agenda bigger than just what they want? Like, how do they and bring people into the fold, this big tent of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, exactly. And it seems that both of them do have considerable reach, particularly Indivisible, into red and purple districts, to use the election phraseology. But to what extent are they actually addressing issues of white supremacy and racial inequality becomes a real, question for anybody who is evaluating what their work is like. So we have an interesting dynamic in the Democratic Party of groups that are predominantly white, aiming to push the party to the left, at the same time as they have very would seem to me is very limited connection with the African American struggles and the struggles of people of color in general, or at least very little direct connection. And the question is,
and direction, David. Like, how can they address an agenda or create an agenda or be inclusive of all people when they don't have those people in the fold?
Well, yeah, and that becomes a question of how you get from there. First of all, how you got there, which is kind of I'm not sure how to put it exactly.
Say it, David, or I will.
Well, was it by default, or just a fit of absence of mind that did they just fall into the regular patterns of segregation in this society?
That, David, that right there. They fell into their habit of just kind of being amongst themselves and not being intentional about including people of color and reaching outside of themselves.
Yeah. And that really becomes a big issue. Now, I'm sitting here looking down at an article in The Nation from this week, which is written by Joan Walsh, who's a very well-known, writer on for The Nation and for many other left publications. Joan Walsh 8 years ago wrote a book called "What's the Matter with White People," in which she does not answer the question. I mean, it's certainly not to my satisfaction. So, on the one hand, she's somebody who's very aware, but of the racial issues that are involved. But as far as having a solution to a problem like this, here's what Joan Walsh says about Indivisible. I've heard someone from every Indivisible group lament its whiteness, as well as from activists who tried to change it. Indivisible identifies racial justice as one of its priority areas, but so far its demographic profile remains constant. So the question is, is this a problem? And if it is, well, look, the thing is that I don't see any justification, or I certainly see it as an implicit criticism when an organization is that white, whether it's DSA or Indivisible.
They both have to be intentional, David. They have to be intentional about bringing Black and Brown and every other nationality into the fold. They have to be intentional about doing it. Also, they're just perpetuating white supremacy. They're just going along like you just said a few minutes ago.
Yeah. Well, the issue is that it calls into question the legitimacy of the organizations. I mean,
absolutely. Say that again, David. Say it again.
To question the legitimacy of the organizations. If they cannot make that shift, and then they ought to disband. Because they've set up a dynamic within the group, you see, that is somehow keeping people out.
And if they're not intentionally keeping people out, it's not inviting enough to bring people in. Like, who wants to be a part of this all white group? And then you'll be the first Black, or you'll be the only Black. I know what that feels like to be the first or the only Black in a room. It's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. I get comfortable because I can get along with any and everybody. But at some point, they have to be intentional about bringing other people into the fold that don't look like them. And it has to be intentional, period.
Yeah, the question then becomes, and this is true for the Bernie Sanders campaign as well, and probably for the Elizabeth Warren campaign. The question becomes, can you do that within a group that keeps reinforcing its own blind spots and its own limitations, without while at the same time thinking that it's perfectly all right to pay to pay homage, or I would call it lip service, to these other struggles. And
I feel that way about the Democratic Party. I know this conversation is about Indivisible and DSA, but I feel that way about the Democratic Party. They talk a good talk. They say they're all inclusive and we're this big tent. But when we start talking about issues right now, like what we're talking about now, specific to Black people, there's that white blind spot, David, that you're talking about.
Yeah. So that becomes a really important discussion. It's almost like it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you start a group that has this overwhelming white demographic, how do you climb out of that? How do you break out of that circle and actually make some change?
I think it's painful as hell for white people to do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
You said absolutely.
Yeah. No, I mean it's not only is it painful, but it's very difficult to do that when it looks like your group is growing, you're very successful, you're having all of this influence, and you're reaching out to Black people. You're engaged in some kind of a coalitional type activity, supposedly under a big tent. But when you're talking about priorities, do you understand that the interests that Black people represent actually represent better than you do the interests of the people that you're trying to reach? In other words, these struggles, for instance, let's take Indivisible, and the issue of voter suppression. I don't know how much work Indivisible is doing on the issue of voter suppression, and if they are not, then there's a real issue about who they are trying to mobilize. Are they trying to just reach out to people who look and talk and act like them? And in fact, that is exactly the case and the argument that you were making about the 40th and your primary race this time around, if in 2017, 2018. There was no attempt on the part of the people who, many of whom were Indivisible, who supported Sally Harrell, to reach out to the communities of color that were in the, or seemingly no effort being made, because they thought that that would alienate voters like the white women, middle-class white women, that middle-aged, middle-class white women that were their constituency. Mm-hmm. So if we have no process, if we have no effort at transforming that base of voters, at transforming it, not simply mobilizing it, but really transforming it into more than simply people who are accepting of being in the same party as people of color, but are really.
I hate the word party. Because it just
party
means
in the sense of being in the Democratic Party together. It's it's like we have these different interest groups, and the interest groups have their own interests rather than seeing themselves as acting in solidarity with one another. It's a coalition as opposed to something that is unified around a bigger sense of solidarity that gets
around
you out.
Everybody,
huh? Around everybody, with an understanding that this country is not simply segregated. It's not simply separated. It's that that we have tremendous structural inequality that reinforces the isolation and segregation of the communities. And if the situation is one of inequality, then the people who are the preferential group have got a responsibility to address the issues in their own communities, so that we're not simply pushing this stuff under a rug when it comes to the issues that are faced by people of color. So voter suppression it has its obverse, its alternate, other side of the coin.
And this is the conversation, David, that white people have to have with white people. Like Black people, we've said this over and over and over again. They're not hearing us. So hopefully that, those that are watching that are white, you are taking this conversation to heart, because David, we've said this.
Well, and it is true that one of the problems here is that the people who are.
Let's read this. Anytime a Black presence penetrates an all-white confine, whites are instantly made uncomfortable because their whiteness and all the harmful effects thereof, either directly or indirectly, come into question.
Yeah, well, that's Malcolm X's point from 50 years ago. The reason they hate us is because we remind them of all of the evil stuff that they have done. That was his interpretation of the attitude of whites. So absolutely, there is a great sense of unease, dis-ease when white people are confronted with their whiteness by the contrast of having people of color around them. Mm-hmm. So in the issue of voter suppression, what I'm saying is that the opposite side of the coin of voter suppression is that voting in this country has and always been a white privilege. And because of that, obviously African-American bond servants, in many cases in the period when the greatest expansion of voting to working class white men in the Jacksonian period and following, when many voting when many property restrictions and income restrictions on voting were lowered or eliminated. That was the same time in which black men lost the vote. There were many places in the North, particularly, where black men were voting, and they lost the vote in the 1820s, 30s, and 40s. Under Jim Crow, the whole basis for Jim Crow was to keep black people from voting. And the same is true for this period in which we have rules, we have people who are, ex-offenders not being able to vote all across the country.
Let's bring this back to DSA and Indivisible and how these organizations need to really bring other people, other ethnicities into the fold and bring ideas and bring an agenda bigger than themselves.
What I'm getting at with this point about the voting, the history of voting, is that voter suppression does not simply affect people of color. It actually has a much broader influence, and that is in working people in general, poor working people. I mean, poor and working people in general. Why is it that the United States has its elections on a work day?
On a Tuesday. And then you know what Georgia has done, David. Now we've always had our presidential primary and our state primary on the same day. Georgia has done something different under this new Kemp administration. March 24th is the presidential primary here in Georgia. And then May 19th is the state primary. So they've separated our primary. So that is another form of voter suppression, because now you can't just get off from work for the presidential primary and go vote. Now you got to get off in May to go vote as well.
Yeah. And that kind of structure, the same thing is true for voter registration. Mm-hmm. This is the only country in the democratic world in which voter registration is a separate process from voting. In almost every other country in Europe, particularly Western Europe, and other places that have a democratic voting process, you are automatically registered to vote as a citizen, and you can vote anywhere. So the voting is a much simpler process, which is one of the reasons why we have such low voter turnout in this country. And the other aspect of it is that what it does is it gives extra weight to the votes of people who are wealthy, who live in areas where polling places are not crowded, where you can just drive up and walk in and cast your vote and walk out. 5 minutes.
Exactly. And on that, we can have a guest in the lobby, David. I'm going to bring in Mr. Sean Hill. He is with the ADOS movement on the heels of talking about voting and the power of voting. Mr. Sean Hill, good morning. Let me get this big old banner out of your face. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we sure can. We sure can. Thank you for joining us. I know you're kind of just creeping in, but David and I have been talking about voting and voter suppression. And what's your take, Sean, on that with the ADOS movement? Sean is huge out in Texas with the ADOS movement and moving the ball about what it means for Black people, ADOS specifically, with reparations. So, Sean, good morning.
Yeah, tip your camera down a bit, Sean. We can't see the bottom half of your face.
Yeah.
Better?
A little further.
Bring it down some more.
Well, I'm on a cell phone, so.
There you go. Just hold it still, sir. You're making us drunk. Yeah, there you go.
That better?
That's better. But just talk loud so we can hear you. I know you're not with us but a few minutes.
Okay, sure. As far as voter suppression and I think we in the black community, especially the ADOS community, have the main problem is that we have to understand that voting is power. Too many times we've believed and been told that our vote doesn't count, voting doesn't matter, and things like that. So that's internal. We have to start there with getting everybody in Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, a lot of these places where we have a large and dominant black community, really all over, but especially those places where we have a large and dominant black community, especially impoverished community, to believe that their vote matters and their vote counts. And so that is the main thing that we have to focus on. All these other tricks and chicanery, uh, that's something beyond our control, but we definitely have to focus on what we can control.
And we don't just give that vote away. That's what I'm excited about with this whole ADOS movement. We're not just giving that vote away anymore. Just because you have a D behind your name, we're not going to ride that ballot. We're not going to just go down the ballot and check everybody with a D. We're looking at these candidates specifically. You better have an ADOS agenda, something specific to reparations and closing this racial wealth gap, mass incarceration. They have to have an ADOS agenda.
Right, exactly. No longer are we going to just give what I always say is use your vote as a weapon, not as a gift. And when you think about a gift, if you give somebody a gift, you just give it to them, and whatever they do with it, that's what they do with it. But when
Mhm.
you use your vote strategically as a weapon, that weapon is supposed to have an effect. It's supposed to affect something. So if you're just throwing you're just voting for the blackest person you could find, voting for somebody black, voting for somebody with a D, voting for somebody with an R. It doesn't matter what the letter is after their name. You need to be looking at that person's agenda. You need to be saying, what is it? What's in it for me? Everybody's favorite radio station, except for black people, is WIIFM. What's in it for me? And we have to start saying, what's in it for my community? And until we start doing that, we're going to always just what I like to call vote for the lesser of two evils. In other words,
Mhm.
ooh, oh Lord, we sure don't want Trump. Oh my gosh, anybody but him. And I've gotten that mess in my inbox, and I put people on blast. I haven't had a problem. If you come to my inbox with that mess, you will get put on blast. I'm not voting for the lesser of two evils. That's just not gonna happen.
And an emotional response. Sometimes we get all Barack was emotional for us, the first black president. So it became like this emotional, this connection. But we're beyond that. I pray we're beyond that. We're much more intelligent than that, and we got to be much more strategic than that, Sean.
Absolutely. Well, the thing about that is we had to go through our growing phase, right? We hadn't had a black president, and so our people are definitely into symbolism over substance. So we got a black symbol, and we didn't really require much of them. Other communities, the immigrant communities, the LGBTQ communities, a lot of other communities, just like with every other president, had some requirements. We were just happy to have somebody up there. We were just happy to have somebody represent us. And boy, ooh, couldn't he sing a song good? And boy, he sure did come into our church. And boy, look how he patted that woman's hand. Ooh, he must really love us. And so we were just happy for 8 years, to allow just a representation of us. But that had a hope for the majority. I won't say the majority of us, a lot of us. We have moved beyond that. And what I want to encourage people with is you don't need to convince everybody. In this last election, 2016, 4% of the black vote was down by 4%. And you see who got elected. You may like that. You may not like that. I personally don't. But the problem was not with black people. The problem was with the Democratic Party that they did not come with the black agenda. So if you don't come with a black agenda, why am I going to vote for you? What difference does that make?
And I said that when I ran, Sean. And it's just funny how everything happens when it's supposed to. Because when I ran in 2017 and 2018, the candidate Sally Harrell never ever had a black agenda. She never had anything specific for the people of color in general in her district. She only had two people on her campaign that were black, and I knew both of them. I met them. I didn't know them. I met them. So that was the extent of her blackness or being involved with the issues that possibly affect us as a people. And a lot of times you get these candidates and they're just riding the ballot or they're counting like they did with Stacey Abrams. They counted Stacey's votes. They knew how many votes they needed to win. A lot of people won on the back of her efforts because they knew Black people were going to come to the polls and do exactly what you just said, Sean. Vote down ballot and voting because it feels good.
Exactly, and we have to move beyond that. We have certain needs in our communities, and one thing I like to talk about is the Congressional Black Cowards, or I like to call them the Congressional Black Caucus, as other people may know them. Is in Lucy McBath. You have a representative there. Lucy McBath is one of the cowards that has not signed on for HR 40, and so we have to do more than have Black faces in high places. That day is gone.
Say that again.
But we gotta have more than just Black faces in high places. That only helps that one person, while the rest of the community is suffering. If Lucy McBath, and yeah, I'm talking about her because I'm on your show, so if I was on somebody else's show, I'd talk somebody else. But if she is in a position where she feels like she just can't sign on the HR 40, which is only a study for reparations. Only a study for reparations. It's not reparations itself. If she thinks she's too good to sign on to that, then what good is she to the Black community? Get her out there.
You better say it, Sean. And I'm gonna tell you, we are absolutely looking at we're looking for the candidate that's gonna rise up and say they're gonna run against her, and they're gonna support ADOS. They're gonna support reparations. They're gonna support.
There it is.
We're looking for that candidate, Lucy. Just know we are watching that district, and we are not playing. We are not going anywhere. You did not sign on. We are embarrassed. This man is in Texas talking about you nationally. It's an embarrassment. Take that back to her, please, somebody. It's an embarrassment that she has not signed on to HR 40. I'm embarrassed.
And they will not have a moment of rest. The day is gone where these cockroaches can just throw the rock and hide their hand. And yes, that's what I call them, because that's what they are to the Black community. Because you can't do dirt and then hide under the night and think that the light will not be turned on you. That day is gone. We have a more intelligent electorate. And now, these days, we are aware, hey, guess what? We have the internet. We see what you're doing on Twitter. You can't hide. You can't throw a rock and hide your hand and think that you can pop up in somebody's church during election time and think everything's okay. That day is gone. And they need to know that, and we will continue to let them know that until it's their election time, and they will not have a moment's peace.
Thank you, Sean, for that ADOS update. I will be bringing an ADOS update every broadcast because we're going to keep people informed and engaged about this movement. I want to thank you for all that you're doing in Texas. And thank you, Sean, for being on this broadcast.
Thank you, guys. ADOS for life. You guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Sean. Woo-wee. You all right, David?
Well,
that was a roller coaster.
My point in all of this is to say, how do we translate this militancy, if you want to call it that, for
militants? Okay.
For European Americans? What should they hear? How should they listen to a message like the one that Sean is
So let me
getting
tell you
out?
the message. So let me tell you the message that Black people are sending to white people right now. Either you get on board with ADOS, either you get on board with reparations, either you get on board with changing the systemic issues that are affecting Black people, because by 2053, we will have a zero net wealth in this country. Let me say that again. By 2053, we will have a zero net wealth in this country. So guess what, white people? If you do not get on board with us, you don't have to. We can have another 4 years of Trump. We've already survived slavery, Jim Crow. We've survived all of that. We ain't scared of Trump. We ain't never scared. We ain't scared of Trump. But guess what? America has already eaten us. The next people that will be eaten they will be eating their own. So white people, you are on the menu. So if you don't see any sense of urgency to be in solidarity, as David likes to say with us, then you're going to be on the chopping block and you will be eaten next, because there ain't going to be nothing else for them to eat when it comes to us. But we have Egberto Willies in the lobby. Let me see where he is. Egberto, you don't step into the fire. How are you?
I had my alarm set to 2 minutes before the time I was told to be here. I didn't get a chance to listen to the beginning of the show. I just heard the last 2 minutes, and it was like, okay.
Okay, but we were talking, hey, I'm gonna bring you back. So we were talking about Indivisible and DSA and how they're overwhelmingly white. And I know out in Texas, because that's where you are, you have been a part of Indivisible. Am I correct?
I am the communications director for Indivisible Houston. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we are. I mean, look, the thing about it is, it's which comes first, the cart or the horse. Indivisible and organizations like these are generally very white and older. And the reason they're very white and older is that's where people with time are. The people who have extra time and extra money are mostly white and older.
Problem right there, Egberto. The fact that they have time and money, that's a problem right there.
So the question then is, are the people in groups like Indivisible aware of the issue? Having a few Black folks like myself in there, they're fully aware of the issues, and they read. I mean, the people in the groups that I'm into, these I remember saying, and this is going to sound kind of interesting. A lot of the white people in the groups that I'm in are quite a bit more militant than I am in things like reparations and things like not reparations, because I believe in reparations, but in things like ADOS and all these other issues. They want, a lot of them want answers now. The truth of the matter is, I think before we get answers, we really have to get a few things down, and I don't think we're sufficiently organized to get the answers that we're looking for yet. I heard the young man there make some statements as if he has the mass of Black people, Black Americans in his corner, when the truth is the mass of Black Americans are supporting Biden.
That's a lie.
No, it's not a lie.
That's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. Watch. Okay, I can't wait for these elections. That's a lie.
I'm not saying it's not going to change. I'm saying right now, today, if you take a look at older Black folk and you try to ask them,
you said it, older Black folks. There's a whole generation of me and those that are younger and my age and your age that are and younger. We are not riding with Biden.
I agree with you, but here's the deal. I'm out there and I talk to older Black folk, older white folk, younger Black folk, younger white folks, etc. And one of the things that I notice that is a hard fight right now is trying to tell a younger Black kid how important their vote is and to go out there and vote. I have a very hard time, and I'm out there and I'm catering to the millennials. I don't cater to the baby boomers. I don't cater to the older Gen X. I'm talking to millennials. And these guys, the way they see it is, it just doesn't matter. We are going to do our thing. Okay? So my thing is, we have to build up to it. You know what is the best thing, in my opinion? It's not to tell folks how big you are, but to show folks how big you are. There's a difference.
And that's why this 2020 election is going to be so. I think it's exciting because a lot of things will be seen. You know, a lot of people are making noise. There's people now that are waking up who have never been woke up before. There are people that's going to be a part of this process that never voted before. So we're going to see a huge shift in, you know, this Biden.
Let me tell you how interesting you are, Miss Shealey, Miss Host. Go on the street in any Black community and say ADOS. And
this is a grassroots movement. This is a grassroots movement, and it's still growing. So don't.
No. I understand.
Be careful.
I honestly understand that. But my thing is, when we have ADOS folk talking huge without a base, I think you get a base first. You act
like you've talked to everybody, Egberto.
No, I don't.
You've been in the hood enough to poll the Black community.
I don't.
So don't make a general statement that you don't know where this movement is. You don't know what we're about to do. And I can't wait until you really see it unfold, so you can like say I'm sorry, because you're gonna come back and you're gonna have to apologize to to everybody on this broadcast and to those that are in the ADOS movement.
I would. If look, I would love to be found wrong. And I would come and apologize.
Okay, well I'm definitely gonna hold you to that. David is sitting on pins.
What's that?
I said David is sitting on pins.
No, I'm really not. I just think that there really has to be a connection made between what the responsibilities are for a group like Indivisible, which is overwhelmingly white, or a group like DSA, which is overwhelmingly white, if they are going to actually be play a progressive role, and not simply reinforce the privilege structures as they exist. So it's really important for those folks. I mean, it'd be pretty hard for a 55-year-old middle-aged white woman in the suburbs to go and talk to young black working class men and tell them how important their vote is. Although it would be useful for them to hear that message from, for young black men to hear that message from somebody, who is in that position. It just kind of flips the script.
I can tell you, David, that here in Houston, I don't know in anywhere else, here in Houston, we had Hurricane Harvey. Okay, our mayor of this city, who is a black mayor in this city, one of the first places that he went to console the people, if you will, was Kingwood, Texas, a very white area. A few of us from DSA and Indivisible and a few people out of Georgia, etc. Out of Georgia, imagine that. We scoured the inner cities and the places that were flooded out where they hadn't seen the mayor for weeks. Mm-hmm. So my thing here is a lot of times we have to be, in my opinion, we have to be careful. Again, like I said, we got a black mayor, and the people who the people who you see tearing down sheetrock and all that kind of stuff, helping in the community to make the exact point that you're making there. DSA folks recruiting and trying to get folks by their deeds. DSA and Indivisible. We have groups in there that is what they're doing. Doing stuff that nobody else is doing.
Well, I don't think David is taking anything away from the good deeds that they're doing. I don't think that's not his point. I think his point is how overwhelmingly white both of these organizations are, and they need to be, my point was, they need to be more intentional about bringing people of color into the fold. And how do you make this more inclusive? You might be one of the only ones in leadership.
I'm not particularly interested in DSA or Indivisible bringing in people of color, because if they bring them in, they're bringing them into a situation which is white defined and white determined. There has to be some sense in these groups that they themselves need to make a transformation, and that their responsibility is to do that with other European Americans, to change the dynamics in their groups, so that they are not simply going out and telling young black men that their vote is important and addressing young black men. They're actually going out to address other middle-aged white women and saying why it is important to have young black men voting. All right.
So say that with that point. Let me ask Egberto. Egberto, how many people of color, black, or whatever, and how many of them are actually in leadership inside of DSA? Like, what is that all?
Let's start Indivisible first.
Indivisible. Okay.
The vice president of Indivisible is a black woman. I am the communication director. I'm a black man. When it comes to DSA, several people on the board, because it's a different structure. We work on a different kind of there's no president and that kind of stuff in DSA. So that is a different setup right there. But several people that are black and brown are in leadership in Houston. Now, that isn't hard to do in Houston, because Houston is a pretty diverse city. Okay, Houston is a very diverse city, and it's not only a very diverse city, but it is a city where there are a lot of diverse cities that you see are very, very white in leadership. Houston is one of those diverse cities where we aren't minorities in this city, where we actually hold power. The problem I always see is with Black Americans holding power in these communities, they don't cater to be all around encompassing. They always cater towards the corporatocracy, and that's what we have here. That's what we have in the leadership. So that is one of the reasons I always come out the way I come out with ADOS, is that my thing is solve the real problem on the inside before you make other Black people your problem.
Yeah, and my response to it is to say that the organizations like DSA and Indivisible have to come up with an argument, a reasoned argument, as well as a connection with white people as to why the interests of African Americans, which seem to be taking priority, are actually in their own interests. That what appears to be a contradiction or a conflict or a zero-sum game between Black and white working people is actually whites seeing their racial privileges as being something that's of value to them, and it's not.
It has to be intentional, and I can tell you in here locally, I can't tell you about Indivisible in Georgia or the other places in Georgia. I can tell you here, it's intentional with the forums that we have. It's intentional with all with the people that we bring in to speak. All of that is very intentional. It's intentional with the rallies we have. Like I said, you're right. These things have to be intentional. I can say that these two groups here in Houston, they're trying. They make that effort to do that.
Well, I would say that I know that there are groups that are doing things like that. I mean, not just for instance, the Jewish Voice for Peace, which is a supportive of Palestinian rights group, has taken in the last 2 or 3 years a tremendous effort has been made to turn them into a group that fights white supremacy here in the United States, as well as in Israel-Palestine. And they make connections between the border wall and the wall that the Israelis have put up to fence off Palestinians. They are intentional in that whole fight for why those two struggles are connected to one another. So it is possible. It's not only possible for whites to do this; it's actually going on, and it certainly sounds like that's the case in Houston. I don't see that happening here in Atlanta, even though Atlanta is a predominantly Black city.
That's my point exactly. Yeah. That let me tell you one of the things that we've said before, right? I've always said that if you have these groups in a community, remember I first said a lot of the reason these groups, in my opinion, are pretty white is because of how money is and because it's older and it's white people who at 55 don't have to work, while Black folks work until they die. So we understand all those concepts. So a lot of times you have to go there. So you have to go where the people are, is the thing. But when you have these larger cities, I remember when we had Caban on the show. Sometimes she would mention what the people in Georgia are doing. The people who rule Georgia, were some of the people that most affected the livelihoods, the life and stuff of the Black folks in Atlanta. I mean, it's a Black city, but still yet, where is the power?
It's in the hands of white people. So give us a national update, Egberto. Bring us on home, and then we'll let you head on out.
Yes. Okay. Let me tell you. First of all, I want to say that I think that the debate on Tuesday, may tell us quite a bit. It'll tell us, in my opinion, whether these people have really been listening to the narrative going out there as far as progressives are concerned. The country has been proven that it really wants a progressive direction, and we'll see if Biden changes, we will see where these people go going forward. I have a hunch there's going to be a lot of happenings at this particular debate. And that's it.
And congratulations to you, because you have access to the debate.
Yes. Thank you very much. I got lucky, I guess.
So what will you do? You'll be covering it. You'll be taking. What will you do, Egberto, so we can be on the lookout for you?
Yeah, I'll be live streaming directly from the floor. I'll also be going to shoot for my interviews with the candidates. I'll be all over the floor. So actually, they gave me a lot more access than I thought I was actually gonna get.
That's great.
That is
great.
awesome. Congratulations, Mr. Politics Done Right. You can find Egberto Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. This man is everywhere. Politics Done Right, Egberto Willies.
Thank you very much, Tamara, and thank you for all the stuff that you guys are doing. It's very important work, and we all have to be handling this, in my opinion, from all sides.
From all sides. Thank you, Egberto. We'll be looking for you on Tuesday.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And the other thing is that there was just this long climate crisis interviews with the I think 7 of the Democratic candidates for president, and we really need to pay attention to that as well. How does the climate change issue, affect the issues of race? What are the not only the inequalities, but the ways to reach European Americans so that they are aware of climate change as an issue of solidarity, not simply as an issue of a crisis in the of the fossil fuels.
Well, let me tell you how black people are not thinking. I can just tell you, just generally, I'm not speaking for all of us, but I can just generally say that we can't even think about climate change to the extent that we would like to or we need to, because we're trying to survive, David. Like, we can't worry if we're trying to make sure we can eat every day, live every day, pay our bills every day. So what black people aren't is into the climate.
Tamara, that is these the yellow vest movement in France. I read an article about it in the New Yorker, in which a woman from the yellow vest movement said, "End of the month, end of the world. It's the same thing."
Not for black people. Was she white or was she black? Because black people don't feel like that.
Well, I'm just saying that that's not necessarily a slogan for African Americans, but it certainly should be one for European Americans, that they understand that the end of the month can be the end of the world for
black people.
Well, for black people and for a lot of other, not just people of color, but
for white people.
People, the end of the month could mean an eviction. It could mean having your telephone, your lights turned off, your telephone shut off. So the question that the climate change people need to keep in mind is how they can tie together those two struggles in a way that gives people a reason to pay attention, gives poor people who are concerned about the end of the month a reason to be concerned about the end of the world.
Yeah, and you have to flip that around, and people, white people and affluent people need to realize that our end of the world is the end of the month. Like they need to really understand that the end of the month is the end of our world. You're looking at the end of the world in the end times. We're looking at the next 30 days. Yeah.
So there really is an important issue to raise. Now, the idea that the Green New Deal is going to present people with going to give an enormous number of jobs and all of these other things that are going to shift the way that the society operates. It has to. You can't simply do that by making a proposal. The forces that are opposed to these kind of transformations, the fossil fuel industry, along with all of its, along with all of those people in the white suburbs who are heavily reliant on cars, and who, by the way, in Atlanta, like in Cobb County, prevented MARTA from being extended into Cobb County.
And stay there, David, because we're at the top of the hour. We're like a little bit over. So you can always find, this broadcast was good today, David. It was a lot more conversation than I anticipated, but I'm excited. You can always find Mr. David Slater right here on Facebook at Acknowledge the Divide. You can find Mr. Egberto Willies at politicsdoneright.com right here on Facebook as well. We will bring to you every week moving forward. We're going to bring to you an ADOS update. I want to thank Mr. Sean Hill for chiming in all the way from Texas. I am Tamara Johnson Shealey. You can find us both at tamaraforgeorgia.com. We have a special announcement for the end of September. We're going to have an event, David. September 27th from 10 a.m. to 12, we're going to have a special Tamara for Georgia broadcast live here in Atlanta. So stay tuned for more details about that. We're going to be having a coffee and conversation. So this will be our first actual on-site, on-location getaway, David. So stay tuned for more information about that.
Power to the people.
Power to the people. Have a good week, everybody. See you next